Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door affords a variety of methods to push yourself to your limits. Whether you choose to adopt those methods, however, is up to you. Those of you who've been around the block know that my limits are pretty dang high, and so I have decided today to do a challenge that very well has the potential to shatter them. Beating the Pit of 100 Trials before Hooktail, at level 1 stats for the whole round trip. The Pit of 100 Trials is a dungeon of endurance intended to be handled near the end of or after your adventure, tasked with wave after wave of increasingly stronger enemies as you delve deeper and in turn become weaker. This dungeon of death is born to crush your spirit. Late game, it could be intimidating for a more inexperienced player, but is otherwise a bruised cruise generally piloted by you. However, with only 2 partners, 1 special move, and no upgrades to either Mario's jump or hammer, fights here are bound to take an eternity, only made worse by the fact that we're as frail as can be. Our max HP and FP for the whole run is 10 and 5, and with only 3 BP allowed to be used at any given moment, it will be an uphill battle for us to survive. If you ever felt like challenges were cheapened by allowing super guards, which is also why for most of the challenges I've made I've banned them, you're probably going to get nauseated by the number of super guards that will need to be performed to survive this one in particular. But it's not enough to be skilled at super guarding here. You have to master them. Otherwise, you will not last long and you will not win. And hey, if you feel T2ID is made too easy with super guards, a challenge like this just may be up your alley. Let me know how that goes. This is currently the most difficult challenge the T2AD remake has to offer that realistically can be completed in full, without continues. Let's talk about prep. Endurance is key here. Unless you're a literal machine, or one of these two chads, you're going to suffer from fatigue sooner or later, so a safety net of a few life shrooms is a good idea. Unfortunately, you can't freely buy them because Westside Roadport is off limits thanks to this toady. So how do you build a supply of life shrooms? Lots and lots of cardio. You'll be making dozens of round trips per life shroom by running in the Rogueport Center shop to buy Sleepy Sheep and hiking to Petalburg to sell those for coins to continue the process anew. For each item you buy, you gain a shop point, and as you save your shop points, you're given various rewards in the form of items. Once you reach 150 shop points, you're given a life shroom for free. This item will restore 10 HP to a fallen party member in battle, which happens when their HP falls to 0. As our only real lifeline, stocking up on a few of these is ideal. I opt to go into the pit with 5 of these since I feel like going in with any more probably won't get me any further unless I know for a fact I have a chance at winning. And at that point, I'm not going to win with any more life shrooms anyway. I've already tried this challenge twice before and both attempts failed on level 81. Though my second was actually 80, you just can't die in rest levels, and I had to leave early for personal reasons. The coins we get from buying and selling Sleepy Sheep, as well as the extra shop point rewards we simply don't need, allow us to buy out any badges we feel could be of value to us, like Power Jump, Last Stand, and Piercing Blow. You also would be wise to snag Mega Rush P from Petalburg, as clever use of this badge can make lots of fights fairly quick. It's risky, as it requires a partner having only 1 HP left, but the bonus 5 damage can make Koops a fantastic sweeper. Honestly, rejecting this badge in itself would make this challenge considerably harder. But I'm not about that life, so there you go. I go into the pit with 5 life shrooms, 2 ice storms, 2 power blocks, 2 thunder rages, and 4 shooting stars. Now let's get this show on the road. These single digits offer nothing of difficulty with Galoombas, Spinias, Spanias, Dolbones, and Fuzzies. Galoombas may hit hard relative to everything else, but they're as easy to superguard as any regular old Goomba. Spinias and Spanias, meanwhile, are harmless so long as Koops is in front, as his natural plane of defense blocks their 1 attack power, and Dolbones are OKO'd by Power Shell. The only other enemy left are Fuzzies, but guard against them and they'll do no damage at all. So you really should just about never struggle here. The reward you're given is also really handy, the Sleepy Stomp badge. It allows you to put an enemy to sleep for 5 turns if it works, which is essentially an instant kill, as sleeping enemies in this game cannot be woken up by any attacks you can dish out that aren't items. So you can go nuts if it works. Continuing on, we have the 10s with Paragaloombas, Pokies, Dark Puffs, Piters, and Clefs. The presence of enemies with enough defense to stuff Koops' Power Shell, as he doesn't have any bonus damage without Mega Rush P, is less than pleasant. Really, it might be worthwhile to drop Koops to 1 HP after a level up so that you can just plow through these earlier floors more quickly. Alas, I didn't. The enemies here are nonetheless not particularly threatening. Paraglumbas are still strong, and Pokies can be pretty bad when lobbing segments at you, but that's really only 2 of 5 enemies I'd say are even mildly threatening. You can at least prevent Pokies from spawning more through using Power Shell a single time, as they can only summon when they're at max height, so as long as you nip that in the bud, it's unlikely you'll see yourself be overwhelmed. And everything else is not worth worrying about. Dark Pops can be annoying when they charge, but they're frail, and the leveling up you'll do will more than make up for any scratches you take from them, Pyters, or especially Clefs. I'd actually recommend using Clefs as a means of dropping Koops to 1 HP. Even if you find only one and it takes a while to be whittled down, it can be a huge help for later. I just wish the enemies here were more consistently grounded to justify the badge more. My whines aside, level 20 gives us the move Fire Drive, probably the best badge you'll find in the pit. It hits for 5 starting damage on grounded enemies, doing 1 less for each enemy it hits behind the front. It also burns for an additional 3 damage across 3 extra turns. Make sure to pick it up, otherwise you can kiss any chances of surviving this challenge goodbye. Now, I don't consider the pit to be at all challenging until the 40s, but that can lead to overconfidence if you forgo strategy in favor of thinking, just press B, easy peasy. And I was reminded of that in the 20s, which is home to Spiky Galoombas, Bandits, Lakitus and their Spinies, Bob-ombs, and Boos. The enemies here actually do start hitting decently hard. Nothing is particularly bulky enough to take a strong enough hit, but we lack the means to dish one out at the moment. I recommend being careful if you see anything particularly powerful in terms of items being held, as I've actually had an attempt to lose a life shroom as early as here because I thought I could super guard a Spiky Galoomba, missed it, and proceeded to lose a life shroom from being frozen by a bandit's ice storm. It just goes to show, you need to make sure to show ample respect to this place. One false step can bring with it monstrous consequences. Both Koops and Goombella saw decent chances to shine, as Boos can hover out of Koops' range, and Spiky Galoombas are protected from Goombella's headbunks. So they both end up complementing Mario well, depending on the set of enemies we find. Lakitus are also here, and are prone to be the biggest trolls we'll ever see. Not so much now, but they have a dark variant later on that will often prove to be a real nuisance. You meanwhile shouldn't worry too much about Bob-ombs and Bandits. The former have high damage potential if you like their fuses and don't KO them before they crash into you, but they're easy to manage as Fire Drive is instant death to them. Bandits, meanwhile, as bad as they can be with good items, are much easier to super guard now than they were in the original GameCube release, as they have a very clear sign to when they're just about to ram into you. So long as you keep that in mind, you should be fine. Making a touchdown at level 30 gives Zap Tap, a badge that grants permanent electrified status on Mario. This badge was situational 20 years ago, and it's only gotten worse on Switch as it no longer deals recoil damage to flying shelled enemies. It can still stop Fuzzies dead in their tracks from stealing from Mario, but it's otherwise not worth any headspace. Speaking of Fuzzies, the 30s hold Flower Fuzzies, Shady Koopas, Hyper Clefs, Dark Koopas, and Parabuzzies. Equipping Zap Tap will make Flower Fuzzies harmless, and if the only other enemies surrounding them are Dark Koopas, you can slowly but surely win with no risk of damage. However, you really should look into using these enemies as a chance to set up Paro Koops, as most enemies here are grounded. And doing just that, you get an idea of how much power Mega Rush PF4 is with good damage control. It's just a shame that you can no longer preserve 1 HP partners through leveling up, as level ups no longer ignore inactive partners, but will heal them to max along with Mario and whichever partner he's currently fighting alongside. Nonetheless, the variety of enemies with predictable targeting makes this easy to breeze through. And once we clear it, we're given Pity Flower on level 40. Do I ever use this badge? No. Is it the worst badge in the pit? Also no. Bump attack exists after all. It's probably the worst badge we can actually use under the rules of this challenge, but that's hardly something to cry over. What it does is grant Mario plus 1 FP 30% of the time whenever he takes damage. A crappy effect, no doubt, but at least the badge is debatably functional. As for the 40s, there are Poison Pokies, Bulky Bob-ombs, Spiky Parabuzzies, Lava Bubbles, and Dark Paratroopas. The latter are not threatening at all, as jumping and headbonking will render them helpless. Bulky Bob-ombs can warrant being tackled differently, but they're weak enough where a couple of power smashes at good times will take them out. Lava bubbles are strong, but being grounded and fairly frail makes them easy pickings for Koops if he's in peril. And even if we lack that option, they're easier to counterattack thanks to the new animations. Poison Pokies and Spiky Parabuzzies, meanwhile, are where I think this section becomes particularly dangerous, as both of these enemies are threatening for their own reasons. Poison Pokies have fairly high HP, and Koops can't one-shot them even while in peril. Meanwhile, they do meaty damage to whether they're attacking the front or the back, and it's difficult to pinpoint who's being targeted. Spiky Parabuzzies are impossible to damage directly, being airborne and topped with a spike, so our only option to hurt them involves Super Guards. We quite literally have to read their flight arc and press B to hopefully hurt them. Not fun. And depending on the items these pests hold, you're likely better off playing it safe and fighting back with your own items. In my experience, attack items are better to use if they can save life shrooms, so see to it you make that way of thinking a habit. And at the end of the 40s, we get instantly proven correct as we spot Charlatan. You may have noticed him on the earlier rest floors, but only now is he relevant to talk about. He sells you items that become progressively more expensive the deeper down the pit you go. If you find him after the Strange Sack is available, you can fill your pockets with Thunder Rages, which can serve to be fantastic attack items for certain enemies deep in the pit like wizards, which are prone to holding deadly items like stopwatches. If you're fortunate enough to see Charlatan, give him your business. Your future self will thank you. Moreover, with the Strange Sack, our inventory has been expanded to 20 max items, now up from 15. We're in good shape with no life shrooms lost yet, but we've still got a long way to go. Now in the 50s, halfway through the pit, there's Badge Bandits, Ice Puffs, Moonclefs, Red Chomps, and Dark Boos. Here's where there's a non-zero chance you can get soft-locked due to the Badge Bandits here. As their name would suggest, they go after your badges. If they steal anything actually important like Sleepy Stomp or Mega Rush P, you might just find yourself permanently checked in the pit. And between you and me, the service here's not exactly to die for. The other real threat here would have to be Ice Puffs, which not only can have irregular positions due to choosing to hover low or high, but their ice breath is likely to freeze you solid. I was lucky enough to not see the move be used, but you can lose life shrooms super quickly if they're given their chance. Everything else here is strong, but not too dangerous by comparison. Moonclefs and Dark Boos are enemies you should be used to by now. Red Chomps, however, can be scary if you're not used to their speed, but they otherwise take the same amount of time to reach you no matter where they are. You'll just have to figure out a visual cue that doesn't involve looking at them directly, as it can be deceptive. I'd talk more about here, but I actually got a mover on level 55. These critters allow you to skip fights when encountered. You're given a free pass for the current level you're on, but can pay to skip the very next fight as well, or 4 other levels and any enemies you would have found there. This gets me to level 60, where I receive Double Dip, giving me the means to use 2 items in a single turn for 4 FP. Decent, as we have items to fight with, but it's not something we can rely on willy-nilly. And now that we've reached this far, things are about to get serious. The 60s are overrun with Dark Lakitus and their Spinies, Dark Craw, Dark Wizards, Dry Bones, and Frost Piranhas. Just about everything here is scary, especially Dark Lakitus. If you see one, Sleepy Stomp it immediately. If they're allowed to act freely, you will be entirely at their mercy, as you simply will not be allowed to hurt them unless they let you. And since they can even spawn allies in the form of Sky Blue Spinies, that's going to reduce the damage of your fire drives for any other enemies that are grounded as well as limit your ability to target other enemies in general, as they have high defense requiring either a 1 HP Koops or piercing blow to even dent them without super guards. If you're doing a regular pre-Hooktail Pit challenge, they're not as bad because you tend to have inventory space to spare. It's worthwhile to hunt for Dizzy Dials, as if made dizzy, Dark Lakitus can't hold Spinies above their heads. Unfortunately, a challenge like this would make other items generally preferable, and this is where I start seeing my life shrooms disappear, with Dark Wizards being the first enemy to see me lose one. I'm not bad when it comes to their attacks, but they have a tendency to heal, which is really annoying because I can at most attack only every other turn, so they can easily outpace my damage if they so choose. They also more often either tickle or resort to lasers. I don't often see their lightning, and when it's used, it's something I'm not really anticipating, so it tends to catch me off guard, and I can't recall the timing to super guard in the heat of the moment. They can be brutal enemies to encounter. And then there's Dry Bones. If you encounter even one, it's often enough to force Fire Drive to be your one and only badge, as it's your only option if you want to permanently stop them. Their ability to rebuild can make fighting them a time-sensitive issue where you may be forced to run if things become out of hand. Their attacks having ambiguous targeting combined with high damage potential can make them good candidates for Thunder Rages if you have them in supply. The other two enemies are strong meanwhile, but for different reasons. Dark Crawl have some of the highest HP of any regular enemies you'll encounter in the pit, and boast crazy high attack power. And since they're always spiky, you can't exploit their weakness to sleep. They don't have any fancy tricks like Dark Lakitus though, so it's a fairly fair test of endurance whenever they appear. Frost Piranhas meanwhile are weak to Fire Drive, and their standard bite can't freeze you like on GameCube. As for their Cold Breath, it can be dangerous for obvious reasons, but good reaction time can make super guarding it viable. I just press B as their mouths narrow and it tends to work. As you can see, we're at the point where nothing is easy anymore. We're going to really need to buckle down as we proceed, as the enemies are not only bulkier, but much more deadly. Though it's with the assistance of Charge, Dark Lakitus are enemies that can wipe your HP out in one single hit now, and swarms of other enemies are going to be deadly if we don't adapt quickly. Upon reaching level 70, Double Dip P is awarded to us. It's another decent badge, but really it's still better than Mario's copy. Odds are both Double Dips won't really be doing anything. The 60s were bad, but the 70s is where things go from bad to worse. Here's where we find Wizards, Chain Chomps, Swoopulas, Phantom Embers, and the dreaded Dark Koopa Trolls. Wizards are weaker in some areas, but stronger in others compared to their Dark cousins. They will prefer lightning fairly frequently, so learning the timing for it is pretty dang essential to not burn through life streams too quickly. Otherwise, you can easily see Mario and his partner fall at different times, and that can be catastrophic. Fire Drive is still effective as their HP set is no higher, but they won't cast illusions, meaning you can't force them to bend to your will. No other way to beat them beyond the way every other enemy must fall. Dark Koopa Trolls meanwhile are just evil. When paired with most enemies you can find here, I have POW blocks on standby to make them dramatically easier to deal with, as when flipped, they're guaranteed to fall victim to my Sleepy Stomp badge. Goombella can also help in keeping them down, so that Mario has time to send them all to bed by a means that will make even how to basic blush. However, when paired with Wizards, that's not an option. And I'll need Fire Drive to deal with all of them. And folks, even though I know how to super guard these thugs, it is not easy for me. The pressure will be on, as like Dark Lakitus, they can charge, and because of their speed, you really have to be ready to handle them when they charge straight as an arrow at you. It's easy to fall under the pressure of the assault here, and life streams are likely to be exhausted. The other enemies here meanwhile aren't generally as bad, but held items can do a lot to make them a threat. Phantom Embers often attack in groups, and depending on your status going in, they can be either a breeze or a bane on your parade. And as you've seen earlier, even if you know what you're doing, it's not unheard of that you can be worn down by the game putting on enough pressure. The only other enemy I feel is noteworthy is the Swoopula. In the original T2ID, these buggers aren't really worth fearing, as they had only one attack where they make like fuzzies and steal your HP. But in the remake, they can just choose to ram into you now, and I swear the timing here is different. Because it feels like aiming to cover their HP drain won't let you protect against their ram attack, and you end up being too late for it. And though their attack isn't very high, it's enough where if you get hit, you can be picked off by a strong enough attack from an ally enemy. It's just brutal all around. Chain Chomps, they're not really too bad. As long as you know how to read their speed, they're probably the easiest enemy you'll find here to manage, and they're a huge help when you're looking to drop a partner to 1 HP, as they have a predictable attack pattern and damage output. Those aside, this can quickly become a horrible, horrible time. Badges from here aren't really worth bringing up. Neither the 80 or 90 rewards in Bump Attack or Lucky Day are actually usable, as they cost too much BP to equip, so I don't think we need to waste our time on them. And this brings us to the 80s, which are home to overall easier enemies, with the exception of the one I named myself after, the Arantula. Though with how I played, disrespecting Spunyas, Dark Bristles, and Piranha Plants is probably not wise. I say this because I actually did 2 previous attempts at this challenge, and lost them both on level 81. And in this run here, I came into the 80s with only 1 life shroom and proceeded to lose it to Spunyas. Wow. You know, I can remember a time where only Piranha Plants felt like their attack would hit well after the animation would suggest. but it feels like most enemies in the 80s had that property, and it's really hard to adjust to. Not just Sponges and Piranha Plants, but Dark Bristles too. However, the luck of Tarantulas means I'm able to keep moving on. It is still possible to win this challenge with no live streams left, but it's going to be one heck of an uphill battle. At least with the exception of Tarantulas, every enemy here has a predictable attack, being limited to only the character in front. Their defenses and attack power may vary, but at least you know who's getting hit and for how much. And that matters a lot. And since I no longer have live streams, I can just choose to let Koops faint, run away, and he'll auto-revive with 1 HP left. It's a scrubby way to set up a Peril partner, but it's about all I really have. It's funny, because this tactic is only really possible on the Switch version of T2ID. On GameCube, 0 HP partners can exist in the field, but that's no longer a thing now. As for how to deal with Tarantulas, Koops can't reliably strike them on every turn, so you're going to probably be depending on Sleepy Stomp here to properly deal with them. That way, they can't change their height, and you can deal with them more easily, and this is for a more favorable loadout. If you're unfortunate enough to encounter 4 Tarantulas, it might be time to cash in the chips unless you have a Shooting Star and some Thunder Rages left over. Fortunately, I didn't have the brace for that, but if ever you encounter that loadout, my thoughts and prayers go out to you. The lack of needing to preserve life shrooms, in addition to my surplus of attack items, and ease of setting up Koops for Peril made the rest of the 80s smooth sailing. And as calm as it was, I knew it was only a matter of time before my luck ran out. And as we began the 90s, it will become abundantly clear that the 80s were merely the calm before the storm. The Reapers of the 90s consist of Elite Wizards, Poison Puffs, Swampires, Bobulks, and the famed Amazy Daisy. Leading up to now, there would be some specific enemies capable of one-shotting us in the 60s and onward, but the limit would be to maybe 1 enemy of the 5 we're tasked with encountering. In the 90s? Nah. Most enemies here have the capacity to one-shot you. Poison Puffs, Bobulks, Amazy Daisies, and those are just the conventional ways we can be ended. Elite Wizards and Swampires can be pretty deadly too if they're holding a particularly bad item like a Stopwatch or a Ruin Powder. Though itemless, they're actually decently easy to manage, especially when alone, as Elite Wizards have the same weaknesses as Dark Wizards, and Swampires having only 1 attack makes them easy to reliably superguard as opposed to Swoopulas. The other 3 though are just ugh. It's really sad when Amazy Daisies are enemies I'd rather see than the other 2. They're prone to running away, and though I'm actually okay at superguarding them on GameCube, their new visual cue does a lot to make them more manageable. You have to look for the single orange 8th note as it carries the hit that does 20 damage to you. And yes, I said 20. It's honestly overkill when your max HP is 10. But it isn't like the pit was designed for you to tackle it like this anyway. Just look at Poison Buffs, they clearly have the right idea. Normally, I wouldn't even dream of trying to superguard Amazy Daisies because 20 damage is just ridiculous. But when it's literally do or die right now, I don't have a choice. At least they're possible to challenge provided you know how their attack works. Same with Poison Puffs. That's not to say I'm comfortable at all with them though. Their Poison Breath doing 10 whole damage, it's safe to say I can't afford to let them hit me even once. I can standard guard them, sure, but that feels futile, as Sweet Treat at most can only heal 8 HP for Mario, and there's 0 chance I'll be able to fill a full unit of star power as quickly as I need in order to outpace the damage they can do. At least Sleepy Stomp and other direct attacks can still hurt them. They're oddly the odd ones out of the Puff family in that sense. And these even made the gift of a Jumpman drop to me. I don't think the badge is particularly good here, but it's a thought that counts. That's what I needed to tell myself anyway. Bobulks, meanwhile, they're downright unfair if you encounter more than 2. You can generally survive 2, maybe 3 if you have a Thunder Rage, but 4? This will be the end of you if you don't have any live streams left, or some type of dodge item like Booze Sheets. I was fortunate enough to find some earlier, whether dropped by enemies or gifted by audience booze, but it should really give you an idea of just how dire this is. It might still be possible to save this encounter if you can get the audience to help you by dropping Koops so only 1 HP left, but between the RNG of needing your audience to cooperate and the risk of a stage nozzle setting them all off, it feels like you're playing Russian roulette. Just instead of only 1 pull of the trigger, you're pulling that trigger likely dozens of times, hoping none of them fire the bullet. The odds of you losing here are very high if you don't get the luck you need, and yet, they weren't the end of me. Despite the peril I found myself in, I felt like I could at least make it to Bonetail. But then I found a fight with 2 poison puffs, a Swampire, and an Amazy Daisy. I had very few items left, and nothing I really had could cover the risk of a poison puff ref. And if I lost Goombella, I did not see any real way I'd come out of this alive. I let my sleepy sheep roam free, and one of the poison puffs that were still awake charged its poison. There was little else I could do but challenge it head on. So I brought in Goombella to finish the puff off that was asleep, and... I couldn't do it. The poison breath came through. From max HP, I succumbed, and that was my best run of this Inferno challenge, ending on level 96. Wow, that was rough. As far as I got, over 4 hours of continuously playing this challenge, I didn't even make it to Bonetail. We were able to keep things together for the most part, but once we got to the 60s and 70s, things really did start going downhill. At least I made it to the 90s for what it's worth, so I did get really close to at least making it to Bonetail, but I clearly am going to need to practice some key enemy super guards if I want to give this another go. Especially for those freaking poison puffs. Yeah, I hear others think it's easy to counter their breath, but I sure don't know how to. Either way, I'm going to have to learn how unless I get some ungodly mover luck or something. Speaking of which, only getting 1 in the 50s really bit me hard too. I know I shouldn't be relying solely on them to survive, but they do go a long way at allowing me to maintain concentration. This challenge just feels draining after a while. At least we got Charlatan at a good time for what that's worth. All in all, I can't really be too mad. There were no ridiculous items I had to deal with, RNG was pretty good minus some really difficult enemy formations, and even the way I lost didn't feel all that cheap, as it wasn't going to last long without Goombella anyway. I may need to rethink my items going in though. But rest assured, I'll be back. Until next time, I want to thank my channel members for their continued support. Splash A, Nintendo 60 Jorts, and MB Switchy. And thank you for watching.